And those are some of the key things we do in the Treasurer's Office. And of course, our focus now is how do we create, what can we do to help jumpstart the economy? What can we do to help create jobs and get things rolling again and create jobs in this economy? That's one of the key things we need to be focused on. There's a couple of initiatives we have going this year with the legislature. The first one is a housing loan program that we have that runs through the State Treasurer's Office. Was passed in 2008, largely as a response to all the disasters we had that year. It's a program where we loan idle state funds. The funds we have haven't been spent yet. We loan those out and put them in different maturities. And some of those we invest with Kansas banks. But this program would loan, and we have an ag loan program that already does this, so we're familiar with this program. But we loan those idle state funds to a bank that could then loan those funds to housing developers to start construction, and that's at a lower interest rate. And this program had some problems with it, so it wasn't being used very much. So we have a bill in the legislature this year that we hope to get passed that would make it easier to use. We sat down with Kansas Home Builders Association, the Greater Kansas City Home Builders Association, the Realtors, Kansas Bankers, Community Bankers Association, and the Heartland Community Bankers. All these groups came to the table. We looked at this program and they gave us a list of changes that need to be made to make it work. And they're going to partner with us to help us get this passed to the legislature. And our changes will make multifamily dwellings eligible, make it easier for the developers and the bankers to use. And the key is, because interest rates are so low, it really doesn't hardly cost us anything to do that this year. The minimum interest rate for us that we will put the money out at is 0.5%. The bank can then mark that up 4%, so the money would be loaned out to the customer at 4.5%. It's a pretty good deal. But our interest on our investments right now is so low that we don't give up hardly any revenue doing investment income doing that. So this is the time to get that rolling, because at almost no cost to the State General Fund, we can help banks, help developers jumpstart some construction. Similar program we have in the process this year came out of an innovation consortium that Governor Sebelius hosted a couple years, summer before last. We had some business leaders say, hey, one problem we're having in some of the distressed areas in state and rural areas, there's a big difference between appraised value on a property and construction cost. The bank will say, we're not going to loan you $1 million to build this building, because if you leave, you're a good businessman or businesswoman, but if you leave, we couldn't sell this building for $500,000. And this is particularly applies to some urban distressed areas and some rural areas. So the program that was developed and we're working on now provides a loan guarantee to help remove some of the risk for the bank in that gap between appraised value and construction cost. And we're hoping to get that through. And again, that's something we can do at very little cost to the State General Fund. Looking ahead, we know the state's in for a tough 12 to 18 months. If we look at the sectors, and if we look at geographic sources of state revenue, we know the Johnson County economy is a big engine. Typically 24–25% of the state's income and sales tax revenues come from this region. Now, if you break it down by sector in the economy, the last I checked, about 22% of our revenues were attributable to the aviation industry, if we're looking at sectors. So the aviation industry continues to be a key part of the state's economy. Mr. Denton over here, he knows that all too well. He spent a lot of time working with leaders from Boeing and Cessna and Learjet.
You sure got a lot of bonds.
Yeah. But we also know this, that when national recoveries start, employment in Kansas tends to be, in large part because of aviation, tends to lag a few months behind growth in the national economy, and state revenues lag a few months behind the growth in that employment. So we know we're in for a tough 12 to 18 months. I ask people, I say, be sure to cut your legislators a little slack this year. They're facing some very tough decisions. Now, long run, I'm bullish on the Kansas economy. We have some key things going into place. The bioscience agri-defense research facility that's coming to K-State, and we should start construction on it this year, is huge. A lot of people underestimate the impact of that. This is going to be a world-class research facility. The primary research for agri-defense will be at this facility, and that spins off all kinds of, the data spun off from that, other knowledge spun off from that, spins off into other kinds of research and development and other animal health product lines. And from Manhattan, right in this region to Columbia, Missouri, is the heart of the animal health industry in the world. And so this is, I think, has big potential for us. The research being done at KU, and especially at the Med Center, and I think we're on track to get a National Cancer Research designation at the Med Center, or Cancer Research Institute. That's important, and that's very big for us. And then we're seeing growth in the energy industry. Oil and gas industry's picked back up. We're the leader in deployment of wind energy. The Siemens Corporation is building a new $50 million plant in Hutchinson to produce wind turbines. The supply chain for that plant will probably equal or exceed the value of the plant itself, and it lends some diversity to all those machine shops that serve the aviation industry. So there's a lot of good things on the horizon. The Fairfax plant is looking at expansion. I think that's part of, in large, some of that is due to the fact that we now have in a knowledge-driven economy, we decided to take taxes off of business machinery and equipment because we realize that investment in technology is essential in our economy, in the knowledge-driven economy. And then the other key partnership that the state has had that I think is very strategic is we have partnered with industry at the National Institute for Aviation Research in Wichita. And we are now the #1 center for composite materials research and development in the nation. And the aviation leaders don't look anywhere else. They look to Wichita first for the research they need. And now a team being led by Via Christi is spinning off the composite research from aviation and taking it to the healthcare field to develop new hip joints, knee joints, elbow replacements, other products like battlefield splints that can be applied quickly in a crisis situation. They don't won't interfere with an X-ray, so they can X-ray through them. Things like that, products like that are now being developed from that research. So long run, and I'd also say one other thing. We hear the problems, but the vast majority of Kansas banks are on solid ground. In my view, if we can get regulators to back off just a little bit and let some of these experienced bankers that know what they're doing start making real estate loans again, that will help. But the vast majority of Kansas banks, like I said, we have some that are struggling, but the vast majority of Kansas banks have long run on sound principles, and we have a good banking community in Kansas. So I think long run, I'm bullish on the Kansas economy. The next 12 to 18 months are going to be tough. I want to be careful. My business side of me says, let's be careful when we evaluate this. Naturally, we have to be careful with our taxes. On the other hand, let's be sure we assess long-term costs. We know that education, particularly pre-kindergarten through 3rd grade, is foundational. Let's don't do things that end up costing us over and over for years to come. So that's where we need to be. We look at where we need to go in Kansas and where we need to go in the nation. Here's my recommendation. What did we learn in Greensburg? Have strong faith that we rely on in tough times, because I believe the good Lord sees us through tough times. Have a faith and a vision among our leaders that says we can accomplish good things even in tough times, and have a process where we talk to each other, we listen to each other, we get the best ideas on the table, we treat each other with respect, and together we move ahead. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Sure. As an honorarium to you, we're going to have you sign a book for children.